Hey guys, my name is Abby Ortiz and I'm going to be presenting my final project on mental health. It is by Steve Lopez, published in 2012, and is titled From Documenting to Eliminating Disparities in Mental Health Care for Latinos. So it summarizes basically how Latinos are less likely to seek out mental health treatment compared to other minorities or overall the white population, and the article explains how it identified significant disparities in mental health care for Latinos and overall recommends directions for future research in mental health services in the Latino community as a whole. And as well, we note that Latinos, children, and adolescents are as well significantly less likely to use mental health services if you look at the percentages comparing to 8% Latinos children compared to 14% of white children, which is a major difference. As well, we note that adult mental health services are as well indicating low services amongst the Latinos, especially persons of Mexican origin. And we can begin to suggest that often the fear of judgment and shame with Latino families comes out when seeking out mental health, as well as the stigma of hospitals or religious values and perspectives can be a major factor in cultural background into why Latinos tend to dismiss the need for mental health care and not see it as a major issue compared to other races. Well, as well, we just overall begin to note that the language barrier at most is the overall factor causing why Latinos don't tend to seek out mental professionals or mental health institutes because there is that language barrier. But going with spirituality and religiousness, we see that most Latinos are of Christianity or believe in Catholic, and they tend to see mental health as more of a sinful type of aspect and see it more dark rather than seeking out to see help. They see it more as seek out prayer and faith rather than seek out going to an institute. But we can as well see that according to this source, I looked up Hispanic Face Growing Mental Health Care Crisis, according to USA Today, published by Jared Weaver. We note that often Latinos people tend to see therapy as a cold nature and view mental health institutes as a darker, more from previous times and more of cultural background, how they used to view it. And they see mental health as a very Western thing and don't see it as it correlates with traditional Latin culture. But as well, noting with the Spanish-speaking Americans, we see that only 5.5% of total U.S. psychologists are actually able to seek out care services to speak in Spanish, meaning that they are bilingual. And if you note the overall U.S. population and only being 5.5%, that is a major, major, major low percentage. And this is being a huge disadvantage towards the Latino community. And in the article, it provides an example. Her name is Jasmine Alcala. Not an example, but a real life example. Shortly she gave birth, she was soughting out help for postpartum, but could not seek a therapist whom was Latino, making it extremely difficult for her to communicate and be fully understood. However, Alcala found that having a Spanish-speaking therapist made it more beneficial in supporting her recovery. So luckily she found one. And Alcala says being able to have someone with a Spanish-speaking background who understands the invisible rule of our culture just really made sense. So if we see having that support and having that beneficial, especially from the institute itself, really plays a huge role. And as we see, Latinos comprise the largest ethnic minority group in the U.S. according to the 2010 census. So we're going to see growing number of Latinos, growing number of mental health cases. So we need that to be that put the right guide and help benefit to better meet these needs. Because as we see, only 1 in 10 Latinos approach a mental health professional today, and that is a low percentage as well. So we find that the major research projects in the last decade have considerably improved the documentation of disparities, because beforehand there had been no documentation, there had been no research. And one major research study was the Boricua Youth Study, which compared disruptive behavior amongst Puerto Rican adolescent islanders and Puerto Rican adolescents in the U.S., which were in the Bronx. And this was important because prior research observed lower rates in the islanders than the youth, but showing after the study, we showed that there was a potential uprising, meaning we have to identify such factors that can be associated with causing this, either environmental or biological. and we need to give greater attention to reducing and eliminating these disparities. Overall, the article explains, seeing if you look at the statistics, we see that there's low percentages and fewer than 1 in 11 Latinos contact mental health care specialists to seek treatment. That is a very low percentage. And as well, if you look at to the graph beside me, you see whites have 44% of seeking treatment in the past year, whereas Hispanics are 28%. And we can see most definitely race plays a huge role into this, as well as poverty, as well as income, as well as the overall language barrier. So it's going to be hard for them to seek out the treatment and get the help they need. So as well, research studies examines the role of social and cultural factors and argue implementing interventions synchronously obtain a potential to reduce and eliminate these disparities. In order for this to occur, we need to reduce the overall stigma. But overall, as you see from the early 2000s when the research was being commenced, we saw that there was an uprise in these disparities and they happen to have been worsening, which is not good. And we see that in order for us the pathway for us to get on a good guide to benefit them, it needs to take place with the mental facility itself. So from the quality of care, the prescriptions, diagnosis, this can all reflect the disparities from the facility itself to the discharge, and we need to address the ongoing struggle for the access for bilingual professionals and erasing the stigma of not needing treatment. So lifetime prevalence rates vary across Latino regions. Their variability points out the importance of the differential social and historical context associated with Latino subgroups. So basically their cultural background and cultural beliefs of seeing mental health as a more Western thing and as more of a sinful thing in their religious views. So as well as for example, we take note in Puerto Ricans, they have higher prevalence rates of major depression and chronic conditions than non-Latino whites. Yet the quality of care suggested by guideline does not differ. But we can suggest that is incorrect because examining specific areas of need and quality care reveal a better understanding of disparities. So we have to take a better look into actually how it is going. And if we see, given the importance of family in Latino culture, we see researchers putting more focus upon individually based intervention that includes family members and family-based treatment. This is known as generalization aids, which is skill-trained processing by incorporating your family, which is beneficiary because if you see cultural factors such as being close-knit families may contribute to the lower prevalence rate of Latinos. But if we note that cultural competence plays a huge role, because if you connect it to the textbook, the term cultural competence refers to how well you relate to the values of that culture. And in terms of Latino culture, everybody is close-knit and they see their family and the importance of the group succeeding the importance of their individual needs or values. But as well, the third major setback to Latinos in seeking out mental health care is because there's this immigrants or nativity effect observed on Latinos with any lifetime disorder, and it acts as a stereotype. So connecting to the textbook, racism, stereotype, and prejudice are all often very known in Latino culture, especially opposed from those of lighter skin or white, inducing onto them. And there's many stereotypes of Latinos being unintelligent, stupid, idiots, cold, or being due to having more gang violence, especially in Mexico. In Mexico, they view Mexicans as gang criminals or immigrants. Even if you noted in politics, our last recent President Trump, noted that Mexicans and those of Latin descent were referred to as immigrants often referred to in more of a negative aspect, which isn't good towards our community, towards the Latin community, because it targets racism, especially from police or other members and it isn't a good thing. And mental health professionals must take aware of this and develop cultural competence, which means they must understand and address the issues of race, culture, and ethnicity going on, to develop strategies to effectively address the needs of the various populations going through this. And in order for this to happen, they need to reduce the disparities and reduce the stigma going on. And connecting to the textbook on page 628, it describes a study involving the women found prevalence rates of anorexia similar across the races, but bulimia was more prevalent among Hispanics and African women compared to non-whites. And we see the higher rates of eating disorders within tending to seek out treatment is actually much less than the Caucasian women, who have less of rates. So these findings actually suggest ethnic disparities in access to care, as well as clinical and referral practices that they may prevent Hispanic or African women from receiving care, which can include lack of bilingual treatment, stigma, fear of not being understood, family privacy, and lack of education about eating disorders. These are major factors, so we see overall improvement in such areas could help benefit and reduce these disparities, including the bilingual support from government, the family support and family-based treatments, and especially being more aware and ignoring the stigma of it being a bad thing, basically. And applications to real life story. I identify as a Latina. My mother was born in Puerto Rico. My father is Mexican, and I both come from various sides of Latin descent, but both of my family at some point have exemplified these disparities in mental health. Like, my family is a real stickler when it comes down to mental health. Like, they see it as not as necessary as long as there is an ongoing causing something, like causing it to happen. Like, there must be a solid reason. And I mean, I understand this due to various events and stuff, but I see that putting the mental health as more of a perfectionist and seeing it as pushed to the side is not okay, and see that it needs to be more brought to the light, more aware that it's normal and not something to be ashamed or feared of. And they don't see it as a major issue as opposed to others involved or to be known. This goes for mental and physical health, like especially in the Latino culture, they don't seek out mental or physical health as much frequently as compared to whites. But in a real life story, my grandparents are bilingual but still frequently struggle and use my mother as an not use my mother, but have my mom interpret them for either seeking out appointments or going places, and they are never offered one. So this, not everyone has someone in their family that can do this, and this is quite sad because there's a major population in our community that need this help, and there's no support. So overall, we need that support from our community, and overall more understanding and intelligence in being able to communicate with our others in our community. So thank you. Any questions?